ia kawaila, he wai e ola no. Manue, ke aloha kune ka puli e hakalau, ku ya kalani au ya namu ya nawe, kana he luna kana he lalo, ka ka he maku makani hai kalani, he ka ai kalani, ka wila nui ma ke hai kalani, hana I kalani ola ke kanaka, ho mai kalawe aka I ke kamana ia e ka honuala, o halawani o ka hiwai hoa ka hua o lelo. Eli eli kaumai, mama wanoi. Velina mai, aloha no. Can you all hear me okay? Yeah, sweet. My name is Kavelau, right? And I was asked to welcome you to what I am now going to call the Piko Aloha ʻāina of this campus. Welcome to Kamakakuokalani Center for Hawaiian Studies. Mahalo. And I was also asked to just say a couple of words about the beginning of our student Hui KaPAA. I see actually a couple of people who were in on dreaming up this idea about what a safe space could look like for Aloha ʻāina on this campus, to discuss things that are political, to have friendly debates, shall we say, right? And forming this hui was really, I think, important. Thank you. Forming this hui was really, really important for all of us. I think we learned a lot, had a couple of events, and really tried to build bridges between other Aloha ʻāina across the campus, but also building bridges between strata within the university, right? So between undergrads, grad students, faculty, et cetera, all the way up and all the way down, yeah? And so I'm super stoked that this hui has been resurrected. And would like to introduce Shelly Muneoka to you all.
Aloha mai kako. I'm Shelly Muneoka, and the student group that's hosting this is called KaPAA, Kapo'e Aloha ʻāina. And speak louder. Can you hear me? This mic. Hello? Is this better? Okay. Kala mai. I'll start over. Aloha, I'm Shelly Muneoka, and the student hui that's hosting this event tonight is called Kapo'e Aloha ʻāina, KaPAA for short, and as Kavelau shared, it was originally formed maybe about 5 years ago, and last semester a group of us were lucky to be in seminar with Dr. Kamanamaikalani Beamer for a class called ʻāina Waiwai that looked specifically at the links between Aloha ʻāina and circular economies. And it was kind of an exciting next iteration of what KaPAA had envisioned at first, because we did have folks from lots of different disciplines and at different grad levels, and it was a really good space. So as part of the course, we got to meet these lovely folks, our colleagues in Germany, over Zoom, and it was like a late night meeting, started at 9 p.m., 9 a.m. for them. And so it's really nice to have them here in person. And at the end of the semester, we really wanted to have a space where we could keep those conversations going and hopefully put into action some of the theoretical things that we had looked at. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Matt Lynch, who's going to be the moderator tonight. He's the Director of Sustainability Initiatives. And yeah, mahalo nui for coming, and hope you enjoy the night. Sorry, one more thing. This is our first event we've done as a resurrected KaPAA, so we're really excited to have everybody. There's a sign-in sheet here. If you haven't signed in, please do that. Part of what we want to do is to bridge community to the university and have more community folks here. So please make sure you sign in. Oh, okay.
Mahalo, Shelly. Excuse me. Aloha, everybody. I'm going to ask in advance for your forgiveness and patience with me. My voice is going. There's a bug going around that I am successfully fighting off. But most of all, I am just really nervous and excited to be having this conversation and to be invited to come and participate in this discussion. So mahalo to KaPAA for hosting, and mahalo to you, Kamana, for the invite, and to all of you for taking time out of your busy schedule to be with us this evening. Shelley, I'm going to cover a few housekeeping notes. So for those of you who have not been in this space before, the restrooms are down the hall, and there is still food at the back that will be offered all evening. And we are also filming. We'll be recording this evening's discussion, and we'll be posting to social media after spring break, so that we can share some of the ideas that are exchanged today more broadly beyond this group. So if you're not already following the Office of Sustainability on Facebook, please find us and stay tuned. You'll be able to pick up and share the live stream when we post it, when everybody returns from spring break. So Shelley introduced me as the Director of Sustainability. I'm most often introduced as the sustainability guy. Really, I'm just a Filipino boy, fourth generation, descended from plantation workers. My grandmother was born in Papuilo on the Big Island, and we still have a family house out in Wahiawa Whitmore area. That's on my mom's side. On my dad's side, I am descended from a long line of rascals, Irish and Scotsmen, who were kicked out of their homelands by the British and shipped down to Terra Australis, or Australia. And so my dad is Aussie, and I was born here, but my formative years, my sort of angry teen years, were spent in Australia. So I come from a long line of rabble-rousers, criminals, convicts, and plantation workers, and proudly so. It's uniquely equipped me for many of the things, the spaces I find myself walking in today. Another part of who I am and that has formed me and informs my interest, and interest is a weak word for it, but my passion to investigate this further is that in my 20s I was a very different person. In my 20s I was very focused on understanding this thing called money and on how money worked and how quote-unquote wealth was created. And so at age 20 I actually worked for Bank of America. And a lot of the work I'm doing now is to reverse the karmic balance for some of the excesses that I contributed to in that former life. I did that because I wanted to literally learn how the wealthy, what do they know different? What do they do different than the rest of us in order to be able to create this kind of intergenerational wealth? And so I worked for the private bank. This is the most wealthy clients of the bank. As a 20-year-old kid that could literally had to sneak into the company parties because I was underage. And that led to a 10-year career in mortgage banking and real estate finance. And some experimentation on my own life where I was using my own life and my own personal balance sheet as a real-world experiment of, does this principle work? And so by age 29, I got a call one day from my financial advisor. At the time, I was running my own firm, a financial advising firm. We did debt and asset management and equity repositioning in partnership with one of my earliest mentors was one of the first African-American women on Wall Street who moved here with her very white, very Jewish husband so that that would no longer be an issue here in Hawaii. And so it's led to some really fascinating experiences. But one day I got a call from her and she said, "Hey Matt, you're a millionaire." I said, "Wow, sure don't feel like one." But on paper, it stacked up. And that's at age 29. Now, I don't share that to impress you because it was kind of mind-numbingly simple to do it. It does not take a lot of brain power to become wealthy. It just requires a certain mindset. The interesting part is that by age 31, I managed to lose it all. That is a different story for a different day that is best told over a couple of beers. So if you ever see me at Manoa Gardens, yeah, let's have that chat. But what came of that was a realization that this thing called money, it's false. And it sets up a really perverse set of incentives that actually led to me becoming more disconnected to the things that really mattered. And so my rude entry point into quote-unquote conversation about quote-unquote sustainability was from a place of deep searching of what really matters. And so I moved back home, broke and penniless at 31, to move back home with my parents who live in Melbourne, still to this day live in Melbourne, Australia, trying to figure out what's next, yeah? And at the time, there was a really intense period of innovation, agricultural innovation, because the Aussies were dealing with a drought that had stretched for 9 years. So this was an innovation born out of survival. It was wound up being a 10-year drought, but I remember very clearly there's a digital printout at the equivalent of Central Station, 22.1, 21.9. That was the percentage of water left in the city aquifer. It's about 15 years ago. And I was very fortunate because I learned from the Aussies this sort of different way of thinking. It was my introduction to systems thinking and my introduction to working in food systems. And long story short, that led to some really fascinating work all over the world. My first deployment, quote unquote, was in Mongolia, where I got to work with communities who were literally, their traditional livelihoods had been already disrupted by climate change impacts. These are traditional herders that were moving en masse into the urban centers because changing weather patterns had wiped out their means of subsistence. And so I went there in an internship literally for 7 weeks, and they looked at me and said, oh, you have a finance background. Do you want to help us do like a bioregional economic development plan for this region? I was like, okay. And so I've been thinking about how to apply some of those tools and skill sets that we've sort of developed in the world of finance, but to repurpose them, to adapt and apply them to subvert the systems which literally hold us in bondage, so that we can repurpose those structures and institutions so that those institutions can serve us rather than us serving those institutions. So I have a graphic here that I'm going to pull up as some framing context for the discussion. But before I do, this is going to be a moderated discussion eventually. And so if anyone, oh, that didn't work, okay. There we go. So if you have a mobile web-enabled device, go ahead and open a browser window, and if you type in sift.ly and enter that code, WL9, that will give you access to participate in the survey. And I really hope this works because I just restarted the membership subscription on it like an hour before the panel discussion. If it doesn't work, we'll scrap it. But do we have any winners? Is anybody? What I am hoping to do is to leave this up and open so that as questions come to mind when we hear from our panelists, we can literally type your question right in there, and I will see as a moderator everybody's questions that comes in. Oh, great, it's starting to work. I'll see everybody's, be nice now, we're in public, please use nice words. And so in this way, hopefully I can start to see sort of emergent or common themes that are emerging from the group, and so do my best to, in my role as facilitator and moderator, sort of capture the voice and the mood of the room. Okay, so it looks like you guys got this, that's good. I'm going to click over before it gets out of hand. In a moment, you'll see, keep those open. I'll click it over when I turn it over to Kamana, and it'll be questions for the panel. So if you have a question and you want to have it for a specific panel member, be sure to note who the question is for, and then I'll see it as moderator. Okay. So, this is my, this is how I understand and think about economies and our economic system. First of all, let's break down the root of the word economy. It stems from the ancient Greek oikos nomos, which roughly translates to management of the home. And if we think about the way that Hawaiians managed their home, the integrated management of the biophysical, biocultural resources here was done in a way that sustainability was not even a word in your lexicon. That was a milestone that you blew by along the way to ʻāina Momona. In fact, if you weren't sustainable, you were dead. Sustainability is just survivability, especially in an island's context. And it's interesting because the ʻāina-based economies of the lo'ikalo and the loko'ia and all of the other integrated management systems that Hawaiians developed were really focused on cultivating the well-being of these primary forms of wealth. I'm going to introduce, or vai, right? And I'm sure that we could complexify this. We could come up with other words to describe other things that mattered in the way that an ʻāina-based approach or ʻāina-based livelihoods were intentionally seeking to cultivate to levels that they were far surpassed survivability into levels of thriving and flourishing. I'm going to introduce the language of finance here, and I'm going to name these forms of capital, okay? So work with me here. Now, free market economies that our entire global geoeconomic paradigm is set up on is based on and optimized for the accumulation, the maximization of one abstract form of fiat currency. I mean, different currencies, yen, dollars, pounds, whatever it might be, but it isn't. Pay attention to these words, an abstract form of fiat currency. It only has value because enough of us agree that it has value. It has no intrinsic value. And we have developed highly sophisticated systems that literally extract our primary forms of capital and convert it into this abstract form of fiat currency that in the modern world is referred to as wealth. Yeah? What I am super interested in today is to repurpose these structures. How do we design and redesign our businesses and enterprise such that they are optimized to restore, repair, and regenerate our primary forms of wealth, our primary forms of capital? Does this make sense? I'm seeing some nods. So in this paradigm, and this is a term that is being sort of developed, I don't know if there's any academic literature on this, but it's really from the field of practice that I'm connected with, experimenting with these kind of thought constructs all over the world. And in this model, profits are the financial surplus of a well-managed enterprise. They are not the end and ultimate goal. Profits are the end result of a well-managed enterprise. And they're a milestone along the way. It's a tool. It is a means to an end so that we can now re-optimize to cultivate, to get back to thriving and flourishing in our primary forms of wealth, regenerative enterprise. If you're interested in further reading on this, look up regenerative enterprise. There's also a article that some friends of mine wrote called The 8 Forms of Capital. That's where this is derived from. And on campus, we actually have an example. Just by raise of hands, how many folks have seen this structure? Okay. So it's a beautiful structure. It is an architectural wonder. But what really excites me about this particular project is the thinking behind it. And this thinking is illustrative of that regenerative enterprise mindset. And it's also reflective of this circular economy mindset. So Albizia, problematic species, fastest growing tree in the world, one of the fastest growing trees in the world. We have so much of it, it's a problem. It displaces native species and it impairs our watershed function. So we have a resource in excess, which is causing problems. Before that structure was built, the common misperception was that it's no good, it's rubbish, right? Not good for building. Well, we've proven that not only can you build with it, you can build beautifully with it. And we've stitched together the supply chain, which is intact. It exists here. In order to build that structure, we had to stitch together all of those different components to to convert this natural resource into a building. But what is also interesting is the end goal is not the extraction of this resource so that we can increase the built environment. The end goal is how can we create economic drivers so that we can not only remove, but replace and replant, repair, restore with native species. And if you think about just straight financials, right? Think about the economic value of a koa tree relative to an albizia tree. And then think about the ecosystem services that the koa tree can provide much better in our native watersheds. Think about the biodiversity service. Think about all the cultural services that species provides. And all of a sudden, that's a true regenerative asset, right? Now, Axel's gonna walk us through this framework a little bit later. And I'm just going to overlay and attempt to illustrate how we're thinking in these circular economy mindsets now. We're using this as a mental construct to aid us in how we go about redesigning our enterprises, right? To restore, repair, and regenerate. So we ran through that already. We figured out how to stitch that supply chain, but we don't stop at extraction. What we're really interested in, and the next pilot that we're working on, is can we go into an acre or 5 that is infested with albizia, remove it, build with it, replant with native species. So, thank you for bearing with me that I wanted to give a sort of localized example of a real-time experiment that is playing with these concepts in real time and on our campus. So we'll be updating the signage soon so that we can further explore that. Anyway, I've talked for too long, and I really appreciate your bearing with me to set that framing context. What I'd like to do now is introduce you to our esteemed panelists. And so I'd like to invite our panelists to join us on stage as I read through abridged versions of your bio. I think everybody here knows Dr. Kamanamaikalani Beamer, who is an associate professor here at the Center for Hawaiian Studies in the ʻāina Momono program. He also has a joint appointment at the Richardson School of Law and the School of Hawaiian Knowledge. Previous to here, the last role that Kamana played was president and executive officer of the Kohala Center on Hawaii Island. Kamana also serves on the Hawaii State Water Commission, representing Kanaka Maoli views and perspectives in our state governing apparatus. He's a very talented musician and also an accomplished author. In 2014, publishing the I'm just going to butcher the Hawaiian language, so kalamai. I'll just go to the English translation, Liberating the Nation, which received multiple awards from the Hawaii Book Publishing Association. So please welcome Kamanamaikalani Beamer. The next guest, Dr. Axel Tuma, if would you come up and join us on stage? And maybe Axel, if you can come to this side of the stage so that we don't have boys on the left and girls on the right. Dr. Tuma is a professor for production and supply chain management in Augsburg, Germany. His research concentrates on the topics supply chain management, production management, and resource management. He received his PhD at the University of Karlsruhe. He's a member of the board of Materials Resource Management Institute and a member of the graduate school Resource Strategy Concepts for Sustainable Energy Systems at the University of Augsburg. He was a former vice president of the University of Augsburg for International Relations and University Development, and the spokesperson of the Working Group Operations, Research and Environment, member of the board of Graduate Program Operations Management, Manufacturing, Logistics, and Services. Please welcome Dr. Axel Tuma. The next two esteemed visitors from Germany, I'll introduce Dr. Andrea Thorenz first. She's the leading interdisciplinary projects of the Resource Lab, which we will hear about in a moment. After her studies in environmental and socioeconomics, she worked as a project leader and director of studies in the economy for many years. As a PhD economic scientist and member of the Faculty for Mathematics and Science, she embodies the networking idea of environmental and resource-oriented research projects of the Resource Lab in an ideal way. Please welcome Dr. Andrea Thorenz and join us on stage. And finally, last but certainly not least, Sandra Boldoczki. Thank you. Sandra obtained her bachelor's and master's in industrial engineering at the University of Augsburg, with a focus on materials, resource management, and sustainability. And since February 2017, she has commenced, she's a PhD candidate studying with Dr. Tuma, with focusing on production and supply chain management. Please welcome Sandra Boldoczki. So, without any further ado, did we miss a? Oh, okay, I'm gonna go over there. I'm gonna turn it over to you, Kamana, and take it away.
So this is a true story. My great-grandfather from Hawaii Island got Hawaiian homes in the 1940s, 310-acre ranch, and tried to convince my great-grandmother to go and move back home to ʻāina. She said, I ain't moving there. You build me a house, and you fence the place, and you have a place to live. So my great-grandfather moved up on his own, literally slept in a tent, shot minor birds to feed himself, cut kiawe trees, and put up his posts around our family's ranch. I come along as a young youth, and in my great-grandfather's house, it's not even a house, it's a small Quonset hut. It's this tiny, very humble home, but one thing I always remember, you walk inside and there's a sign. And the sign says, if you can't dazzle them with good looks, baffle them with bullshit. So the thing is, tonight, I'm going to do neither of those. I'm going to do something far more dangerous and risky. I'm going to tell you folks the truth. And the truth is, we're powerful. Though many times we doubt our abilities to engage and change large systems and systemic problems, we may look at the sheer scale and mass of the problems that arise from humanity, things like climate change. I look on the faces of young and old, and I find mana. I find power here this afternoon in the mud under our halau. Take a moment, just look around you. Who could have imagined such a diverse group of people? Many of you I've never seen before here in this center, and you're always welcome. This is our place. From different walks of life, different countries, different cultures have gathered here tonight because there's something that unites us. We come together tonight because each of us know that our homes and communities are in jeopardy, that we are at risk, that people we love and the places we cherish are under increased threat because of human-induced climate change. We gather because the very nature of our existence as humans, the unique cultural systems of our world, those of Europe, the Americas, Africa, Hawaii, and the broader Oceania, are being assaulted because of the systemic changes to our planet's natural systems as a result of the effects of global climate change. At this very moment, the lands of our cousins in the Pacific are being inundated because of sea level rise. And we gather because we must change this trajectory of demise and restore dignity, liberty, and aloha in our world. We gather tonight to attempt to link the philosophies of Aloha ʻāina with contemporary movements in Europe and around the world that seek to mitigate the impacts of climate change through adopting a circular economy. And the truth is, in some ways, our planet will share the collective impacts of climate change, but it will not harm all of us to the same degree. Much like the benefits and profits in the existing capitalistic economy, the impacts of climate change will operate without equity. In fact, at least in the short term, climate change will most likely bring the greatest harm to those with the least financial wealth and the nations that to this point are the least responsible for its causes. The truth is, our planet has come to this point in the history of civilization where for the first time in the history of our world, not because of so-called barbarians or savages, neither witches nor Orientals are the root of this problem. We are here simply because of man's greed. We are here because of imperialism and the colonization of indigenous lands. We are here because the modes of production of governments, companies, and the consumptive patterns of those in capitalistic societies consume our world's resources at such rates that are entirely impossible to sustain. We are here because some in our society struggle to eke out a living working multiple jobs to earn wages that can barely allow them to pay rent in Honolulu, or while graduate students fight to be unionized and paid fairly, at the same moment separated merely by miles, caviar, marbled floors, infinity pools, and a whole bunch of tax breaks, others fly in and out of our islands on private jets. We are here because our collective society and the planet's natural systems are out of balance and must be restored for humanity to survive. The truth is, I'm a professor. I think I have the best job on the planet. I have letters after my name, and the truth is, I'm terrified. I'm afraid because in preparing this talk last night, my 6-year-old son asked me at the dinner table, why are the animals going extinct from gasoline? Don't people love the animals? I'm afraid as a father for the future of my children. And there are millions of mothers and fathers like me. What kinds of lives are we leaving the generation to follow if we allow our planet to be lost to the 1%? If we allow the greed and consumption of a few to lead the future for our planet? And I'll tell you, though some of the 1% have tried to convince me that the only real future for humans as a species exists in colonizing other planets and inhabiting places like Mars, which of course require further desecration of ʻāina, building bigger and more telescopes on Kanaka lands, I say to those who presently hold the financial resources to create, design, and finance such expeditions, use those resources to save the only planet we know supports life now. Our world scientists have told us we have less than 12 years to drastically alter our emissions to save our planet. That keeping our planet's temperature from rising higher than 1.5 degrees Celsius would, quote, require rapid and far-reaching transitions in energy, land, urban infrastructure, including transport and buildings and industrial systems. Why not use those resources to literally save our planet? Why not use those resources to act now? And in addition, while we are looking into space to find water, the key to all life, can we please clean and care for the only known precious water resources our universe knows to hold now? Those here on Mother Earth. Like we all should have learned from our grandparents many, many years ago. Clean up your own house before you try to move to someone else's. The truth is, in spite of all of this, I refuse to be consumed in fear. I refuse to be consumed in hate. We cannot allow the complexity of problems nor the weight of kuleana to break our backs. Today, we must be courageous. We must build alliances like the many Aloha ʻāina who came before us. We look to the philosophy and relationships with Mother Earth and our planet's natural systems to help us achieve a better future for our islands and our planet. If this be a game of konane, then let us play for the last move, to preserve and give life to future generations. And the truth is, tonight, I believe that Aloha ʻāina and Circular Economies and the building of international partnerships and coalitions can help to save our planet. Aloha ʻāina has had powerful warriors. Before I was born, January 30th, 1977, George Jarrett Helm wrote, "The truth is, there is man and there is environment. One does not supersede the other. The breath in man is the breath of Papa, Earth. Man is merely caretaker of the land that maintains his life and nourishes his soul. Therefore, ʻāina is sacred. The church of life is not in a building, it is in the open sky, the surrounding ocean, the beautiful soil. My duty is to protect Mother Earth who gave me life, and to give thanks with humility, as well as ask for forgiveness for the arrogance and insensitivity of man." And the truth is, Aloha ʻāina has been fighting climate change, greed, and the arrogance of man for generations. Perhaps not everyone has joined us, but every time an Aloha ʻāina has stood up to try to stop an island or a piece of ʻāina from being bombed, restored a lo'i or a fish pond, outplanted a native forest, or resisted another hotel built on the bones of our ancestors, we were essentially fighting against the capitalist philosophies of endless development and consumption that has brought our planet to the brink of extinction. We were trying to wake up others around us to the harsh realities that our world was heading in a terrible direction. We were trying to restore the systems that truly brought liberty, freedom, and happiness. Like George Helm, we're up against incredible odds, standing face to face against perhaps the most powerful force in the world that our world has ever known. And like George Helm, we can draw upon Aloha ʻāina as a grounding philosophy to provide courage and strategy. Sometimes I believe we underestimate the power of Aloha ʻāina. How is it that the word aloha is used to express so many seemingly different kinds of relationships? The feeling a grandchild has for a grandparent, a lover to a partner, a mother for her daughter, the empathy you have for a sick child, right? You're looking at your keiki and you want to solve it and you can't because they're sick. And the relationships between people and resources. It's that same feeling that we have with Aloha ʻāina. It's a familiar relationship. And in spite of illegal overthrow of our country, seizure of our lands, our philosophy of Aloha ʻāina has remained. And it remains. I have known the incredible privilege of having been graced with the aloha of my grandmother and to be a keiki raised in the alo of the presence of kupuna. Aloha ʻāina exists in each of us like seeds of potential, which could sprout to life at any moment when we are returned to Kane'ekawai'ola, when we are returned to water and the blessed soil of our kupuna. Tonight then, we are opening the po'owai, the sources of water, and soaking the seeds of Aloha ʻāina to restore a forest of hope and courage for our future. What is Aloha ʻāina? We translate aloha, love, respect, regard, compassion, value. Aina, sometimes translated simply as land. Dr. Kamele Hiva, who's here tonight, reminds us that Aina, literally translated, means that which feeds us as people, as humanity. Brothers, sisters, daughters. And Aloha Aina has been translated as a philosophy and movement for the union of culture and ecosystem. Because of Aloha Aina, our kupuna created powerful resource divisions such as ahupua'a, culturally appropriate, ecologically aligned, and place-specific units with access to diverse resources. These land management systems actualized Aloha Aina. These were both geographical and political land divisions that often extend to the sea. Aloha ʻāina was actualized in these lo'i systems, complex water management and agricultural systems that made use of distinct ecological niches. Because of Aloha ʻāina and because the philosophy that we held that tried to see connections and relationships between humans, nature, and the natural systems, it enabled us to develop integrated natural and human systems on land. Aloha ʻāina enabled us to develop integrated natural and human systems in the nearshore marine environment where fresh and salt water mix. Because we saw the connectivity, the relationships, right, instead of the silos and the differences. Aloha ʻāina enabled us to develop complementary systems that were circular. Lo'is didn't exist independent of fish ponds. Right? There was connectivity, there was interaction. Our old oli, such as Aihea Kawaiakane, Melenokane, tell us about the water system and water cycle and these connectivity. And due to the recent and powerful work of Dr. Natalie Kurashima, she's powerfully demonstrating what Aloha ʻāina have been saying for generations. She's actually quantified that our indigenous system of agriculture is more efficient than modern conventional agriculture, while also being more climate resilient. Recently published in Sustainability Journal. In fact, using only 6% of the lands, our ancestral agricultural system produced enough food to support about 86% of our population today. While so-called modern agriculture in Hawaii uses nearly 4 times as much land and is dependent on outside inputs for yield, presently produces only 13% of the food we consume. You know what's even more powerful about her work and her conclusions is that there's still great opportunity for us to utilize these systems. In fact, 71% of the lands used for ancestral agriculture remain undeveloped in Hawaii today. Aloha ʻāina then didn't create a subsistence economy. It's not that we are on these islands just to subsist. Aloha ʻāina created a circular economy. This was an economy where waste was minimized, where unique ecosystem niches were maximized to increase productivity. This was an economy that provided an abundance of cultural and natural resources for a swelling population that existed for centuries on the most remote and isolated islands on our planet. Because of Aloha ʻāina, because of the ways our society was connected to nature, to Mother Earth, because of the centuries of observations of natural systems and place-based understanding of spawning cycles and rain patterns. Today, we are about 2 generations into the Hawaiian Renaissance. We are a generation into the vast restoration efforts of ancestral agricultural systems across our islands, of lo'i, of loko'i'a, of fish ponds, of community-based economic and resource management systems. And because of the warriors of the past who kept Aloha ʻāina alive, today many in Hawaii know Aloha ʻāina to be a path towards a better future. We have leaders in the fields of agriculture, aquaculture, forestry, water resource management that keep Aloha ʻāina as a central part of their work. And because of the innovators of Aloha ʻāina today, those that work in loko'i'a, for instance, we can see how Aloha ʻāina will guide us into tomorrow. About 5 years ago, I met these amazing colleagues that sit by my side tonight. I was struck by their authenticity, their realness in their approach to their work, as well as the ways that their approach completely broadened and opened my mind to new possibilities and new ways of thinking about sustainability. Aloha ʻāina is a powerful and grounding philosophy that guides our approach to relationships between humans and the natural world is familiar. But because of my interactions with my colleagues and their work on circular economies, I've asked myself questions. I've had to think about the relationship between Aloha ʻāina and products, for instance. How would Aloha ʻāina and the economy manage waste and the ways that we manage water, for instance, in an urban space, or the built environments and the ways that they may interact with natural resources? The goal of a circular economy is to decouple environmental degradation with economic growth. Essentially, it's about producing jobs and enhancing the well-being of society while enhancing our natural resources. Who would argue against that? A circular economy tries to be more labor-intensive than resource-intensive. Here's an example. We visited Paipai'oheia, the fish pond, and we're looking at a makaha, a gate that essentially connects a fish pond to the ocean. Essentially, like its veins, its lifeboat. And though Kili'i folks never were authored or learned about circular economies, they approached it in this fashion. This is a fiberglass gate. Kili'i said it was great at first because it lasted for a long time. One person could carry it. But they started to worry about what were the effects, what were the fiberglasses it's breaking down and being eaten, by the fish and other species. What were the effects that were going on? So they rebuilt the gate over time. And you can see the difference, right? The beauty of this one is one person can carry it, move it in and out. This one takes about 4 or 5 big, strong guys. It's incredibly labor intensive. But it's composed of natural materials. It has a name, ho'okele. It requires people and culture to interact. It creates a memory, a connection, a reminder of the past with hopes for a future generation of Aloha ʻāina. I ask you tonight, look at the faces in this picture. Do you see the looks of pride and community on their faces? Do you see warriors battling climate change? Do you see the possibilities of Aloha ʻāina? Mahalo.
Aloha all these engaged students and all brothers and sisters in mind to come together and struggle for all this Kamana said, for having a more sustainable, hopefully a little bit better world. So thank you so much that we can be here and discuss with you. So it's difficult to catch you up, Kamana. This is strong words, and it's some technical things, but I'm really, really thankful to be here. You saw this slide, one of the last slides of Kamana, where we've been as a fish pond. It was an amazing time in my life, learning from Kili'i. His name, I think, was Kili'i, how the fish pond is managed. And this was maybe one of the starting points we discussed these concepts of Aloha ʻāina, where I'm a very, very fresh man. And the circular economy. And then you see this picture from a very, very remote place in Switzerland, where we have been, I think, 1 year ago, and carry up this discussion. So I'm really, really thankful for being here. Maybe one word concerning why I believe in circular economy. And for example, if you look out here, so it's perfect, the sun is coming down, you see different shades of green. Yesterday I remember I'd been at this wonderful beach at the North Shore. The sun comes down, it was wonderful colors. And we are so lucky that we can live in this world, in this abundant world. And when I see these pictures, I ask myself, how can we do that more generations, our children, our grandchildren, and many more generations can live there? And Kamana said there is some fear, there is some threat. And if I look to Mother Earth, I see she does it for hundreds of millions of years, obviously very successful. And then I see a tree, so I see many trees here. And if you look at a tree, it's an amazing thing. The tree grows up maybe 100 years, maybe more. And it grows and grows, and at the end, it may fall down, and then some microorganisms come, and they convert the tree to earth. And the earth is a starting point for a new tree, for a baby tree. And this grows on, and it goes on in many, many cycles. So the thing Mother Earth does, she lives in cycles for hundreds of millions of years, and she survives, and in this way she is maximum sustainability. This brings me to the idea that we have to learn, and we have also to learn to live in a certain way in cycles. So this is my idea of a circular economy, and you will see it farther on. So maybe only a few words of us. So we are coming from this point here. You have Bavaria. You all know Bavaria because you know the Oktoberfest. So switch the view totally. So the Oktoberfest takes place in Munich. And they drink a lot of beer there, but sometimes they don't drink any beer, and then they go to research. So we have a research lab nearby Munich at the University of Augsburg. Andrea is the leader of this research lab. And when we don't drink beer, we try to make some research. And especially, of course, we want to think in the same way Kamana pointed it out. So the research lab is joint cooperation between two schools of the University of Augsburg. One is the School of Management Economics I come from, so I have a chair of production supply chain management with a focus in research on closed loop supply chain management and energy efficient production. Andrea and Sandra come from the School of Math and Natural Sciences, Institute of Natural Resource Management. And when we make projects, we put all our thoughts together and we do this at the resource lab. So there are different topics the research lab does research on, and what I want to do is we decided to split the talk a little bit in two parts. The next slides will be presented by Sandra, who does his PhD on circular economy related issues, and she will give you some insights, if you don't know it already, concerning what is a circular economy in contrast to a linear economy or a recycling economy. And further on, I will, on behalf of Andrea, catch up with some projects we do in the moment in the resource lab, addressing some points. So our talk is in a certain way divided in 2 to 3 parts. First, the more conceptual, theoretical parts, and some projects. And at the end, maybe an appetizer for this, I hope, very wonderful for me as a student, something to learn. What is the concept? What is the difference? What are the similarities? What are the different focus? So now I give the stage to Sandra, and she will teach us a little bit concerning what is a circular economy. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you for the introduction, and also thank you all for being here. I'm very honored to be part of this discussion. And as Shelley pointed out at the beginning, I don't see her right now, but we had the seminar last semester, and it's just such a great experience to actually get in touch with people from the other side of the globe and to just see that people are working on the same things as we are. And I'm really excited to meet like you all in person and for the discussion afterwards. So thank you all for that. What I'm going to do now is to talk to you about the concept and origins of a circular economy as we understand it in Germany or in Europe. Let's get started with that. So what we have right now is this linear economy right here. So we take the resources, we make products out of it, and afterwards we just dispose of them. So that obviously results in a lot of waste. We do recycle some things, so we do close some loops and mainly reuse the materials inside. So we already have some kind of waste reduction. But where we actually want to go is we want to close all the loops. We want to keep our products in the loop for as long as possible at their highest value, so that we finally can minimize waste. So that is actually the goal what we want to reach. So circular economy can be defined as a system that is restorative and regenerative by design, because it aims to keep materials in the loops, and that one is the important point here. We want to preserve the value, so we want to always keep the material at the highest utility. And by doing so, we can minimize waste. And what we finally want to achieve is, I think what Kamana mentioned before, the decoupling of economic growth from resource input. So that is actually our aim right here. So is it a new notion then? Is circular economy a totally new concept? Obviously it's not. Like, it has different roots. It has, as you pointed out, ʻāina, that is circularity. It's lived circularity, so people knew about it. But I think at some points we may have forgotten about it, so we have to just re-educate people. And I'm going to show you, like, as we understand it, the major schools of thought where circular economy pretty much stems from in Europe. So, at the very top, we've got the performance economy. So the performance economy already focused on closing the loops, and what we have here is they analyze how to optimize the use of the stock, so how to best make use of what we have. That's one point. We've got the blue economy. The blue economy right here took inspiration from nature. That is an important part. And it also introduced the thinking of like using materials in cascading systems. So materials and energy, which means, like I pointed out before, always try to use materials at, like, maybe wood, for example, use it in construction, and then afterwards you shouldn't burn it, but maybe use it in, shred it and use it in other type of construction. So we want to have these cascades. We've got biomimicry. Biomimicry takes nature as a role model again, because nature, it naturally works in loops. All we see outside, like trees grow, they degrade, they feed back to the soil, so nature knows how it works. We just have to take a look and try to mimic it. Then we've got industrial ecology, quite a powerful movement. Industrial ecology, they analyze material flows. And additionally, they introduced industrial symbiosis. What does that mean? It means that the ecosystem should not be seen separated from our economic system. Those two systems, they interact with each other, and we shouldn't forget about that. All we do in our economy has an impact on the environment. We should always keep that in mind. The last school of thought I've got here is the cradle-to-cradle design. Again, like most of them, we've got the inspiration by nature, but we also have this quite prominent idea of waste from one process equals the food of another. So that's what we need to make use of to close our loops. The picture you can see here, the one with the two circles, that one inspired the visualization of circular economy. Matt showed it at the very beginning, and I'm going to talk quite a lot about this slide now. So, this visualization that's adapted from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. They're very active in this field of research. So if you want to look something up, they have a lot written on their homepage as well. And we got this idea of the green cycle and the blue cycle. The blue cycle would be the technical one, whereas the green cycle is the biologically one. And you can imagine it like that you can either have a product of use, that would be the blue one, the technical ones, or a product of consumption, that would be the biological side right here. And whenever we have biologically based materials, like for example, wood or food or whatever, we consume them, and afterwards they can feed back into the ecosystem. When they do so through processes like composting, for example, they regenerate our living systems, and they provide renewable resources for our economy. So I've got an example right over here. What is a product of consumption? For example, this shampoo, you can see right here, you use it and afterwards it's just gone, so we consumed it. So what are our strategies for products of consumption? We want to design them in a way that they can feed back into the ecosystem. So that shampoo is biodegradable concentrate. So you can use it and then it goes into the water cycle, but it doesn't pollute it. And that's our strategy for products of consumption, to design them in a way that they can easily feed back. So what have we got on the other side? We have the technical cycle. And technical cycles recover and restore products of use. So whenever we have products of use, we have different strategies. We can prolong and share them, for example. So a product of use would be, for example, a smartphone. Take a smartphone. At the end of its life, you usually would just maybe use it for 3 years and then dispose of it. So that's what we want to avoid. And we want to keep the circles as small as possible. So you can see, what you can see here is kind of a prioritization. So the smallest cycle is the best option. The second one would be at the end of its life, we could repair it and then reuse it again. We could refurbish, remanufacture it, so we could take out certain components. Maybe we've got 3 broken smartphones, but if we put them all apart and then put them together, we could restore one working one, so that would be fine as well. And in the last resort, we would recycle it. Why recycling the last resort? Is recycling a bad thing? No, of course it's not a bad thing. You should always do it, but still in the last resort. Let's stick with the example of the smartphone. Like a common smartphone has roughly 40 elements of the periodic table inside. If you recycle it, what do you think, how many of them can you currently recover? It's only about 4 to 8 elements. The others are lost. It's always like a matter of energy to recover materials, but currently it's only like 4 to 8. So we, like we heard before, we want to maximize our resource use. And by like losing all those elements, we're not doing that. But on the other hand, if we reuse the entire product, that where we maximize our resource productivity, and that's what we want. Of course, this also holds true for the green cycle. You see the cascades right here. For, like you pointed out before, wood, for example, we have cascading uses as well. So incineration should always be the last option. Cascading use gives priority to all utilities, like to the utilities of the highest value. And incineration, so energetic use, should always be the last option. There's, like I said, I'm going to talk quite a lot about that slide. So there's one more thing I'd like to point out. And as you can see, our circular economy is framed here. It's framed by waste prevention and by sustainable consumption and production by design. So waste prevention is an obvious goal of circular economy. But we could also go like a step further. And to achieve sustainable development, we need to go further than by just making the most out of the products we currently have. I'll give you an example of what I mean. So I'm a researcher, I'm a PhD student right here. I work in an office, quite a nice one actually. I've got a good working PC. But the question is, like, what am I doing? I'm using like Microsoft Office. I do like PowerPoints and Word. I Google a lot. I do emails. I maybe have one software, one demanding one. But I actually don't need like a high-performing PC. And I guess that holds true for most people working in offices. So right here we could, like I said, like take a step further up and think about product design. So couldn't we maybe replace it by a smaller one or by a thin client? So maybe we could just have one client that supports like a lot of working stations. So that way we would use less resources in production and less energy during use. So we would have to change the way we design products, tackling eco-design, and we would have to change our consumption patterns. And what I'd like to say with that is the circular economy, it is a very powerful strategy, but it's not like the only solution to circular economy, to sustainable development. So there's more we can do. Right, so back on track. Let me give you like another example of what circular economy actually can achieve. And I've got an example of the green loop right here. So the city of Phoenix had each year 34,000 tons of palm fronds that end up in municipal landfilling. I guess you guys can relate quite good to that problem. I don't, but you've got quite a lot of palms here as well. So what they did with this farmer waste is they took the palm fronds and mixed it with recycled dates and some kind of wheat, grain, and other materials, and they created a highly nutritious livestock feed out of it. So they turned the farmer waste into livestock feed. And by doing so, they first diverted like 34,000 tons from landfilling. And by replacing conventional livestock feed with this new farmer waste feed, they saved almost 60,000 acres of farmland and also almost 30 billion gallons of water. Additionally, the project created 12 jobs and resulted in $170,000 by not landfilling and generated sales worth 10 million. So you can see right here, circular economy has not only environmental value, it also has like an economic and social potential. We've got the blue loop right here. So if you think of a typical bottle of cleaner, what you've got inside is more than 90% of water and less than 10% of actual ingredient. So we use this detergent and then we throw away a big plastic bottle. And additionally, we mainly ship water around the globe while it would be accessible at homes, like hopefully it should be. So this company, Replenish, it's called, they invented this construction right here. So you pretty much have this one reusable big plastic bottle on the top, and you have a concentrate, just a small pot, which you can attach to the bottle. So you can reuse the bottle again and again, and only replace this small concentrate. Again, by doing so, we have an 80 to 90% reduction of energy, plastic waste, and carbon dioxide. And they enable their customers to make conscious purchasing decisions. So customers can reduce their environmental footprint, and in the long term, it's even less costly. So again, we've got environmental, economic, and social potentials right here. I've got one last slide right here, and I'd like to have a look at the bigger picture of sustainable development in Europe and the link to circular economy. So what means sustainable development for us? In the 80s, the global discourse about sustainable development started with the Brundtland Report. And the Brundtland Report defined sustainable development as a development that meets the needs of the present without compromising future generations to meet their own needs. So that's what we understand of sustainable development. And this report laid the groundwork for the following Earth Summit in Rio de Janeiro. And right here, the Agenda 21 was adopted. And this agenda defined guidelines for sustainable development in the 21st century. And that targets all three pillars of sustainability. So what I mentioned before, the economic, ecologic, and social potentials, those are the three pillars of sustainability. And we want to tackle them all. So afterwards, we've got right here in the 2000s, we've got a set of Millennium Development Goals. They mainly focused on reducing poverty. And in the World Summit, these aims were reaffirmed, but also the World Summit put like an emphasis on multilateral collaboration, because we need to collaborate as we do, and I hope to be building on it to solve the problems we face. And that's what they try to teach us. Then we've got in 2012, we've got another meeting again in Rio, but 20 years later. We had the United Nations Conference on Sustainable Development, and they launched a process for the development of another set of goals. And those goals were finally defined in 2015 with the Agenda 2030. So that's the goals we're trying to meet. And those are our sustainable development goals right here. It's 17 goals. And they address, again, the global challenges. So they address poverty, inequality, climate, environmental degradation, prosperity, peace, and justice. So what's the link to the circular economy now? Circular economy mainly focuses the aim 12 of sustainable production and consumption, but as stated by the United Nations, it also addresses some of the other goals. For example, the goals related to energy, to sustainable cities and communities, life on land, life on water. So circular economy is a powerful tool to achieve sustainable development, but still it can't be the solution for everything. So I think there's still a lot we can learn from each other. And yeah, I'm really excited about the discussion we're going to have afterwards. Thank you very much.
Okay, I hope you're still awake. And we proceed with some projects, 2 to 3 projects we had at the resource lab addressing this blue loop, this green loop, and the waste issue. The first project has to do with the reuse of mainboards, of motherboards, of computer systems, and especially telecommunication systems. And we are also pointed out that reuse is mostly a dominant strategy compared to recycling. Recycling, and she said, we have these iPhones, I have one here, of course, and she said 45 elements of a periodic table are inside. So if you think that if you subtract radioactive elements, maybe we have 60, 65 non-radioactive elements, more or less a huge portion of the globe is in this tiny system. And if we do recycling, you say that only 5 to 8 are coming back. But it is only a part of the awful story. You can say it's a pity that we lose it. But remember, for example, what is in. Just start with copper. Copper is, all of our, you know copper. And I don't know if you have ever been at a mine mining copper. So copper, maybe if it is good, it is a content of 2% in the mountain. You grind this mountain down to the consistency of a beach in sand. And you can imagine what energy it needs to grind a mountain to the consistency of sand. Then, if you think in rare elements, you add radioactive substances to solve the rare elements out of something like the sand and beach, which is not really a sand and beach. I want to say that additionally that we lose it, we do a lot of harm to Mother Earth if we put it out, and put it out. And then we just throw it away. If we even do recycling with many of them. Maybe just one follow-up. Unfortunately, in this device is tantalum. And tantalum is more or less, most of tantalum is mined in the East Congo, which means in between a civil war. And the civil war is more or less financed by this tantalum, although I have probably inside this device. So it's really a good thing, not only to, recycling is good, I don't want to say this, but a good thing would be to keep the elements as long as possible in the cycle, and this means the reuse issue. So this is a point I would like to focus a little bit on this project. The second project, which is more or less the green loop, is a project we have sponsored by the European Union, and as you all know, we are in the very unlucky position in Europe that we more or less has no fossil fuels or fossil resources. So if now the great guys from Great Britain spread away, if they have a little bit in Scotland, they go also, they want to go something in Norway, but more or less nothing. So the main goal of this project is, can we substitute fossil fuel, in this case used to make polymers for construction, by agroforestry waste, not put in the agroforestry waste to the landfill or burn it down in an incineration facility, but make intelligent biopolymers out of it and use these biopolymers instead of this one made of fossil fuel. So it's the end to turn this black economy a little bit in the green one, taking this agroforestry waste. I will speak about this soon. And as Sandra said, unfortunately, now we will not be able to close the loops, the green loop and the blue loop. So what we have to do is to avoid what is left, to avoid waste. So I will speak a little bit concerning waste prevention. But let us start with the first project, and as we learned from Sandra, there is a way from a linear economy to a recycling economy, and we can say all the guys in Europe are not so bad in taking this first step. So I think about 40, 80 to 90% of the WEEE waste, electrical, electronic waste, is being collected and more or less most of it is recycled. This is a quite good quota. You see 660 kilotons per year in different countries in the European Union. So we did it a little bit coming from a linear economy to a recycling economy, but this means still missing about 32 elements of this iPhone. So this project deals a little bit with the idea of increasing the reuse rate, which is only 6% now. So we are far away from a circular economy. We may be just in a recycling economy in this content. So what we do, and hopefully I bring the point, what we do normally, so I'm an operations research guy, industrial engineer. We do have mathematical programs, we do optimization, we do simulation. And the question is, what is an optimal network, for example in Europe, to promote this reuse? So for reuse, you need a lot of stuff to be economic viable. So the question is, for example, for us, what is the optimal economic network for reuse? What means economic optimal? Imagine a company, and the company collects all the old stuff, computers, telecommunication, motherboards, mainboards, and of course it costs something, the collection, the transportation, the recovery. And economic viable means you do it till this point where the resell, you get some money by reselling the mainboards, as long as you get a little bit more money, or maybe at least break-even point, the same money from reselling as you spend for the transportation process, for the recovery process, for the collection process. It is economically viable for you, and you will do it. So a network who does this stops at this point. It is better. It's not only a recycling network, it is a reuse network, but it stops at the point where you will not have any profit with the last part. We also optimize such networks from an environmental point of view. So the collecting has some environmental burden. And the question is, where is the point where the environmental benefit, difference reuse to recycling, it's just at the break-even point to this additional environmental impact. So this would be the optimal solution from the environmental point of view. And if you see that a little bit different, what is the difference? One difference, of course, you collect not so much stuff in the economic system normally, because you don't make profit with the last things which were even profitable from an environmental point of view. But you see something else. You see that the economic optimal network has one recovery center, and it is in East Europe, in Romania, and you can suppose the wages in Romania are less compared to Germany or France or Britain. So from an economic point, this is, you get more profit. And you see, if you have a recovery center here, it's a too far distance from an economic point of view to collect stuff from Spain. If you have a more environmental optimized network, you collect more stuff. You will have it more in the center of Europe, the recovery centers, and then you can also collect the stuff from Spain or from some more remote places. You can even go a little bit further. Hopefully it's not too technical. So you can calculate. For example, you be in the situation of a profit-taking company, of an NGO, or the state, the government. So you can just calculate. This is the difference between the optimal, for example, the greenhouse gas emissions in the optimal economic scenario and in the optimal environmental scenario. And assume this is in percentage, the gap is 100%. Maybe 1 million equivalents of CO2, which we are better in the environmental point of view. And you see, to realize the first 40% of this gap costs only a little bit money. So maybe 5% of the profit you will lose if you close the gap by 30%. If you close the gap by 80 to 90%, you will lose maybe 20% of the profit. For an NGO, it's absolutely okay. If it makes profit, an NGO will go in the direction of the environmental optimal solution. A profit-taking company will stop here. So I know you're in a special situation in Europe. If you do this, you need licenses from the different countries and states. So what we now suggest to these government guys, so you should only give a license. They make a profit. You should only give a license if they go up to closing the gap by maybe 10% to the optimal environmental solution. But you see, things are difficult. Even if you collect something, you have environmental burdens, and just we want to figure out what is the optimal way. So, second example, green loop. So now we have some interesting things because I have a movie and I hope it will work. So we have a project from the European Union I mentioned before, and the main goal of this project is to substitute fossil fuels by agroforestry waste. And we have to look at this in a special way because we want to do it in a sustainable way. And I have some slides, what does it mean, do this in a sustainable way? This means we should not have any competition to the food sector. We should not in any way change the way of traditional farming. So I came back to this point. But hopefully it will work that I have
Oil-based materials are everywhere. They are part of our everyday lives.
Oil-based materials are everywhere. They are part of our everyday lives. The problem with this is that oil is non-renewable, and extracting it and turning it into products uses a lot of energy and produces greenhouse gases. So, we need to find more environmentally friendly ways to produce the materials we need. We have an abundance of agricultural and forestry waste, like bark and straw, that goes unused. This can be used to create green products that can replace their oil-based equivalents. Think of a house. It has cement, wooden panels, insulation, and many other products that contain oil-based materials. ReHap is a research project looking to change this. It will develop new sustainable, eco-friendly processes to make new products for the construction industry. So, how will it do this? First, ReHap will analyse what resources are available, where they are, and how much we can use without affecting important activities such as food production. The project will then develop better processes for extracting the valuable ingredients, sugars, lignins and tannins from this agricultural and forestry waste, using less energy and producing less CO2 than their current equivalents. Let's go back to our house. Using these sugars, lignins and tannins, ReHap will develop wooden panels, cement, insulation and adhesives that are greener and have improved properties. Put them all together and you've got yourself a very green house. To demonstrate this, ReHap will build a house using all of these materials to test their performance, show that they really work and prove their commercial potential, not just in the construction industry, but in the products we use in our everyday lives. ReHap will also analyse exactly what impact each of these materials will have on the environment at every stage of their life cycle. Europe has a huge amount of agricultural and forestry waste it can use. By creating products from this waste, ReHap is not only providing commercial opportunities for industry, but also helping the EC meet its ambitious targets for a greener economy.
It worked a little bit. So you get an idea what is the main goal of this project. So now I came back to the point, what is our part and what means a sustainable view in this project. To make it easier, we do it on county level, but on the European level we have, if you only take wheat, we have total wheat biomass of about 284 megatons around. The first thing I said, we don't want to touch in any way the food base. So it will never happen that, for example, we would like to grow some oil crops instead of food. So this, in this case, we have a crop to residue level of about 1 to 150%, which means 142 megatons are grain, and we will not touch this in any way. So we would have 142 tons of straw, and the idea is not put it into landfill, not put it into any incineration, but use it in an intelligent way, making biopolymers out of it. But to it sustainable. What does mean sustainable? So farmers use the straw for soil conditioning. If we put all the straw away, this would mean they would have more fertilizers, which amount of energy, which will be not good for Mother Earth. So we asked the researchers, what is the optimal amount of straw you need for soil conditioners, for soil conditioning? And they said about 60% should stay on the field. If you do more on the field, it's even over-fertilization by the straw. So at the end, we have only 40%. 40% would mean about 57 million tons. But it's also not the end of the story. There are typical ways of farming in Europe. So the farmers would take the straw for animal bedding, a little bit animal feeding. In Great Britain, where you have a lot of horses, you more or less, we come to the result that we don't have any excess straw. So we don't want to change this. So again, we have to subtract something from our potential. We are be happy in competition to power plants and pulp and paper industry because these things, they burn it down and we have the better ideas. At the end, so really we count any pig, any sheep, everything, and any horse in any county, and came to the results that we have about 46 million of tons. And we did it with barley, we did it with Maistover and so on. And the end of the idea is, again, we won't have a European economy replacing fossil fuels by agroforestry waste in a sustainable way. At the end, the question, a little bit as in the project before, what is the optimal structure, taking into account sustainable issues, and also optimal from an economic, but also optimal from an environmental point, thinking greenhouse gas emissions and other environmental goals. Let us come to a last example. As Andrea said, unfortunately we are not in the position now to close all these loops. So important is to prevent waste or to minimize waste, to reduce waste. For example, to do something like car sharing or pooling, which means we would need less cars. Because we are not even able to close the loops really up to now. In this frame, we had a project from the Bavarian government, and she said we should develop activities. In this case, we really developed about 40 to 45 activities. The guidelines will be available in English soon. You did it last week, I think, the final improvements. And we developed about 42 activities for the waste prevention, especially for communities, because the Bavarian government said the communities should be the front runners in this thing. If you reduce waste, for example, car sharing would be activity, then it would not also mean that you have less quantity in waste. It also means you save greenhouse gas emissions, you save water, which would be used otherwise if you have the projects, and so on. And at the end, you serve critical resources, as we discussed before, which even have an impact of the human life. I will demonstrate the effect on the city of Augsburg, which is a city of about 270,000 people living there, of only 5 of these activities, and you will see what you can do with implementing these 5 activities in a city with about 250, 60, 70,000 people. The activities are computer equipment, which means Augsburg has about 6,500 people working for the community, and most of them have a computer system to do their work. And computer, you know, maybe every 5 years you replace it with a new one. And the question is, should the old one, for example, a desktop computer, should it be replaced by a laptop? You already mentioned the mini PC. I will discuss again what a mini PC is, or a client server system. What will be effect in having a different lighting system? So in Europe, you know, a little bit more on the northern side of the hemisphere, in winter it's very dark, so a lot of lightning in the streets. What will happen if we change normal lighting by LEDs? In many ways good, in some ways, but also has some problems. Water provision, I think you use tap water. We unfortunately use in many times bottled water, so all the co-workers bring their water bottles, glass or plastic with their work, and so we have all these rubbish and waste of plastic and glass and so on. Refillables means we have a medium successful soccer team, but any 2 weeks we have about 40,000 people go to the soccer event, and the question is, should they, do they use refillables for beer drinking, or one way and throwing it away? So the difference is huge. And e-government is, do you have to go for any event? For example, you have to fill something, some letters for your tax report. Do you have to go anytime to the community center, or can you do it in a certain way with the e-government solution? Just one idea what comes out, coming to this effect using a desktop. Sandra already put it on the table. Quite interesting. The next alternative would be the laptop, and you can discuss now, is a laptop better than a desktop? And I say the answer is not really clear. But for example, if you live in a resource lab like we, and you would have a solar panels on the top. Unfortunately, we don't have. You see, not everything is good in Europe. We don't have. There are some legal problems and other financial problems. So if we would have a solar system on the roof, the difference whether we are energy self-sufficient or not only depends on using desktops instead of laptops, mainly laptops instead of desktops. So laptops use much less energy, but we will see they also come with some burdens. As Sandra already said, we need laptops, or we need the calculation power of desktops and laptops, because the optimization and simulation are models. But the workers in the community, they don't need such a huge calculation power. And it would be sufficient to have a small calculation unit, maybe as a backpack, and we call it mini PC. The last is a client server system. And just come to the results. These results, and you see the complexity, 5 different environmental goals. The first goal is wastewater reduction, amount of waste in kilograms. The next is global warming potential. The next is use of water depletion, metal depletion, and toxicity. And you see in 3 categories, the desktop is the worst alternative. So it's very heavy, quite huge amount of weight. Global warming potential in use phase, it needs a lot of energy, and also concerning water, it's the worst. The laptop is better in 2 to 3 dimensions, so it's not so heavy. And it really consumes less energy, but it's bad concerning all these critical substances like the tantalum and the niobium, because it's more tiny, and the functionality is sometimes easier to realize. It's more critical. Let me say critical elements, so it has a little bit more focus critical. And this is how it works. But you see the mini PC in the client is really better than the other alternatives. And if you only need this calculation power, the reduced calculation power, it would be much more clever. And the community of Augsburg did this, and the community of Tübingen did that. So it's really a game. If you take all the 5 activities we had before, which is, I think, what do we have? 5 for the model thing. It is the waste, it is the greenhouse gas emission. Again, for all 5, let me count back what else 5 have been. It was LED instead of normal lighting on the streets. It was tap water instead of bottled water. It was refillables at the soccer event. It is the establishment of the e-government. This would mean in the city of Augsburg, compared to the actual situation, you can reduce only concerning these 5 activities, you can say a huge amount concerning the weight, but maybe more interesting, about 50% of the global warming potential. You can say 30 to 40% of the water, and you can say about 20% concerning critical metals, and toxicity is catching up. If you take these 5 activities, which is not so hard, to be honest, if you just look To the LEDs. The LEDs are critical concerning metal depletion and toxicity. So in a certain category, a certain activity could be worse, and we don't tell the whole picture. But you see, this we mean with waste prevention, and this is one way to try, not really to close the cycles, but what we can do so that the impacts are not so heavy. So now I come to the end, and I have only one slide, and it is advertising for you, maybe, or not, for you all. Just thank you for it. We don't really know, but we are in the position, and to be honest, I know only a very little. I'm a very, very fresh man and a very good student in the moment of Kamana, and I could learn a lot of things, so I cannot do it for ʻāina. But if you look at the circular, we discussed it yesterday and the day before, I think one thing both concepts have in common. Maybe I don't know whether I get the picture with the tree and then the Mother Earth and the hundreds of million years of good, bringing good to your minds. But what does Mother Earth do? In a certain way, you can say she thinks. If Mother Earth thinks, she thinks on a very, very long language. And we unfortunately think often in a day, a week, maybe a year, maybe a few years. But it's difficult for us to have this long planning horizon. And I think the good thing both of this concept do is a little bit help us. And I think ʻāina does it better because it touches the soul and the heart. And you see it in the different, even in the talk. I was really much touched by the things you said. My talk is a little bit more technical. Maybe this is a problem with circular economy. Maybe it's a little bit too technical, and we don't really reach the heart of the Europeans. So we have to learn a lot from ʻāina. But for long-term thinking, I think it's in both concepts, the idea. If you go to the sustainability goals, and this was one first attempt not to compare it because it's unfair. Not everything should be compared, such as a platform. Yeah, responsible consumption and production is a goal of circular economy, especially production in this way prevention of consumption. I put it here dash. To live on life and to live below water, I think ʻāina said. To live on land, I would see to say. And no poverty, zero hunger. Unfortunately, I don't see it really in circular economy, but I see it in Aloha, and you know it much better. So I think there are some different thinking, there are some similarities, and now I'm eager, and thank you so much. I apologize for my bad English. Thank you so much for your patience.
Thank you very much, Axel, to our esteemed panelists. It's just so fun to say esteemed panelists. I'm just going to sit here, I hope you're okay with that. There were a couple questions that came in. I'm going to open it back up. I think they might have timed out for some of you, but if you want to submit some questions, it's still open. Again, run out of battery, right? Technology is great. So I'll just read a couple of the questions. Has anyone on the panel addressed population of humans, which drives the most impact of resource demand and use, and thus also climate? How do we address this? Comment, more humans, more stuff, more waste, more ain't better. Where can I find resources to help me design circular enterprise? Another question, this is something that I found myself wondering, listening to all of your comments tonight. It's clear that there's a lot of really robust work that's done on it, and that there's been some pretty sophisticated analysis tools that you've developed with sort of high technical specificity and granularity. And I found myself wondering, how can these tools that you're developing, we talked earlier about tools that have been developed to perversive ends, to strip and convert our primary sources of wealth into abstract forms of fiat currency. And you're developing an alternative set of tools that can help us to counter that and to help us think through these things in different ways and to be more thoughtful and strategic and intentional and a more aloha-based in how we are thinking about interacting and intercepting, indeed, the global economic paradigm that we are all entangled in. So that kind of, I kept coming back to that question as I was listening. How can circular economy help to advance Aloha ʻāina? And for the Aloha ʻāina practitioners in the room, I think that question is also useful for us to ponder. How might learning different ways to express the things that we are doing already help us to advance the things that we are doing in different spaces? We've got some more questions that have come in. How can we help? Do waste calculations consider the cost of doing something with the waste? But wow, that's a profound question. I'll leave that till last. Let's see. What do we need to know? What types of things need to be researched at an international level to reach a circular economy? Sort of like, what are the next steps? What are things we can do where we're at? What are things that need to be enacted at scale? I'm not doing a very good job moderating, am I? Because I'm just reading out all the questions. What I might do is, now that I've shared some of the thoughts from the group, turn it back over to Kamana for some perspectives on some of the things that have been raised, but most of all, how do you see, Kamana, how circular economy frameworks can help to advance Aloha ʻāina?
Sure. First, I want to thank Matt and my colleagues from Augsburg. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here tonight and to collaborate and work together. I think what strikes me about circular economies and my work with Axel folks, it's almost hard to translate it in a way. I want to get students to Germany and to visit their lab and to visit communities that are actually producing more power than they consume, that are generating revenue off of the power that they produce because there's policy that companies actually have to buy it back. And so the potential to me of circular economies is that oftentimes Aloha ʻāina, I think the critique is that Aloha ʻāina has been about sort of stopping the linear economy or stopping development or stopping a particular issue. And I think that's a fair critique. But the reality is it's actually about a vision for a different future. And circular economies to me offers these opportunities because it contextualizes how in different spaces we can rethink our economies in ways that don't degrade the environment but actually do produce jobs. I think we all want that. And Aloha ʻāina hasn't done a lot of work on products. We've been so focused on resources and Mother Earth and nature itself. We haven't really thought about products that we consume on a daily basis and the clothes that we wear. And even if something is produced in another place, how is that affecting the environment of that place? And my work with Axel folks, I was amazed. Criticality studies, when the first presentation Axel did, I'll never forget it. It changed my paradigm. There was energy production in 1650, and it was a windmill and a water wheel, and there was a periodic table, and it was like hydrogen and oxygen and iron. And then he said, this is how we produced energy in 1650. This is what the elements of the periodic table we needed. And then there was a picture of a PV panel, and basically every element in the periodic table popped up. And he said, Kamana, sustainability isn't about changing one form of consumption for another. Right? There isn't enough elements in the known universe to produce PV on the scale to power the planet. So we have to rethink the elements and where they go over time and how we reuse them. And I had never thought about
sustainability or Aloha ʻāina like that. So I think it's an incredible, and the technical aspects, it's actually what we need. We don't have the technical aspects in the same way that you folks do, and so it's complementary to me.
Mahalo. It's a really interesting notion of thinking about circular economy frameworks to help us scale Aloha ʻāina approaches to cast forward that compelling future vision that we know is possible. Andrea, I'd like to bring your voice into the conversation. And I know you've been a key part of this incredible work that Axel and Sandra shared with us. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share a few more of the questions that have come up. And then I'm going to pose a question, and then you can take your choice of which question you'd like to take out, or maybe take an opportunity to share some thoughts, can contribute to the discussion. So a couple of other questions that trickled in. Can we discuss some of the nuance of waste as an input? Please discuss Aloha ʻāina as a system. An earlier slide showed Hawaiian agriculture as a productivity system. What is the strategy for implementing and convincing this with the 1%ers? Wow, these are not easy questions. Do waste calculations consider the cost of doing something with the waste? I have a half question came in. How do we address the? And I guess I'll throw one more into the mix, and you can pick and choose. And maybe.
Yeah, what would you recommend? It's a little bit difficult to understand here. Maybe
Yeah.
with the reverse of the loudspeaker system. What is the most? What really wants the audience to know? Unfortunately, we don't have the answer, but maybe we can have some remarks. What is interesting from your point of view?
Sure. I'm curious about how we can be more thoughtful, strategic, and circular.
How can you be more?
Sorry, thoughtful, strategic. How can we be more circular in thinking about what materials we allow into our island systems? This is something we talked about at lunch today.
Yeah.
And what are the mechanisms for us to address that?
Oh yeah, yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you to my colleagues, and thank you inviting us here. So it's so exciting to talk to you all, and I also greetings to my students here, or to Kamana students, and you listen. It's so fascinating. So what I want to say is, some years ago we started here with many of interviews and talks with people all over the islands, and we had so interesting communication concerning especially the transfer station, for example. We visited them, and we were very, very impressed about some of, or many of your transfer stations here on the islands, because they are more advanced than in Germany. So you have these the reuse centers, maybe you know it, the convenience centers on the transfer stations. And I think it's a really, really good thing to go there and to pick something second-hand, but to use it again. And so I think it is really, really good to have the behavior and the thinking about that, to think in circles and not to throw everything away. And that are really, really good examples here. And so all the time we have the chance to come here several years. So it's really, really good for us to go back and have also very good experiences here and talks to the people. And I think it's very, very important that we share our thoughts and our experience. Yeah.
Maybe two examples which we had together. One with a lunch in the Mensa here at your campus, and then you brought us to this, I don't know what the name of this small restaurant was. We had
Banan.
Yeah. And here, you told me, and Kamana told me, for the student, it was the idea of students. So the food was not in plastic, It was covered in, I don't know, some recyclable or biodegradable stuff, or even reusable, maybe biodegradable, which would be an example for the green loop. And then we go to the restaurant, you said there, and the spoon was made of wood, I think, and there were different bins for composting, for recycling, and for trash. And I think this is a good way, this is a good starting point, and this shows that if all the people you are, the engaged people, the people who want to change something, they can do it, and it's not so difficult. So one question of you, I think, was, the situation of an island is very complex and very difficult. I think, I don't know whether it was you or it was the consul today. In Europe, it's quite easy because we have so many neighboring countries. So sometimes we are crazy and think they are not our friends, but they should be our friends. And we have to, we need all the countries even to establish this reuse. So in your case, it's really difficult because you are in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. Everything comes here. But I was really impressed by Kamana's talk. In former times, you were able to feed about 1 million people by the taro, by the fish pond, by the proteins. It's amazing what you achieved. Now, it's really difficult. Maybe all this Western lifestyle we have, and I have to be honest, I'm also addicted to it. All these Western lifestyles makes it difficult. So this even reuse, it would be difficult. Maybe it would mean that you ship all the things to California or maybe to Southeast Asia, and even the transportation does take some CO2 emissions and so on. To be honest, I don't have the solution. It's really difficult. But it's, on the other hand, you are a very specific point in the world. Any people loves you and your island. You are magic. So if you achieve something, everybody will look to you. And I think even the Germans will come. What will happen if the French people and the Polish people decide they are not any longer our friends? So like the British in some way try not to make too much politics out of it. But I think, I have no real answer. What is the best thing? We had this master thesis on photovoltaic recycling. I think we have to work. I just don't have the answer now. One thing I want to say, for example, to make clear what the complexity is. E-mobility is, in my belief, a good thing. But I think out there in the world, there are about 1 billion, it's unbelievable, a little bit less than 1 billion normal cars. We cannot substitute this 1 billion cars by 1 billion e-mobility cars. We don't will have the battery system. You told this lithium and this elements we don't even have it. So we need a total different way of lifestyle. We need a sharing community. We need that we have maybe 1 car for 20. So, but it would be no problem. If the cars drive alone by itself, I have an app. I don't need my car. My car stands 99% of all its time in the garage or at the parking slot of the university. So 100 other guys could also use it, and then we would only use maybe 100 million e-mobility cars. This maybe is possible if you have a good infrastructure. What I want to say is we have to change the way we live in a certain way. We have to rethink it. But you have wonderful people here, and as I learned today, even today in the 2 spots in the restaurant and afterwards, your students are fabulous. They are very good. They are, and your entrepreneurs are perfect. They have it in mind. And Kelly in the fish pond, he has it, and you have it, and you all have it. So I'm not so. In your talk, of course, you could be frustrated. You are not frustrated, I know you. But they are also very intelligent, creative, young people, and they will help us. So we have a chance, of course. Sorry for the long remark.
Axel, I really appreciate you. I'm just cognizant of the time and want to respect everybody and thank everybody for coming and spending your evening with us to explore this further and learn more from our colleagues from
We
literally...
stay here for a few minutes so we can also task in person. So maybe
Absolutely.
it's easier
Yeah.
for my bad English.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's, what we'll do is we'll be here if you want to have some discussions with our panelists. I want to give voice to some of the questions. There's obviously additional questions came in. And then what I'll do is I'm going to put a closing question up for us all to ponder as we leave this space. And as I do that, I'll give it over to Kamana for the final word for the formal part of our program. There were a couple of other questions that came in. How do you introduce the paradigm shift of Aloha ʻāina regarding consumption and production when our island economy is reliant on tourism? How do we apply the concept of closed-loop supply networks to isolated communities while drawing from native Hawaiian culture? Ohana being instrumental to Hawaiian well-being, how can our families begin to support circular economies? Is that even possible? That's actually, that's a really powerful question. How do we take that back into our home? Are there waste products that we are developing in our own homes, in our own ʻāina-based enterprises and activities that we might be able to reframe and rethink of as useful resources for others? And I think Albizia Project is a good example of that. I know that we do that with mangrove posts, and what other examples can we come? I know that the ingenuity exists in this room and in our communities to be able to draw those dots together because it's something that we intuitively already do, and now hopefully tonight we have additional tools and language to be able to describe these things to others so that we can build and expand our communities of practice. I am going to attempt to put this, what I thought was a very profound question, if I can make it work. Is that working? No. Boy, talk about a anti-climax, huh? So, let me try this. I'm going to leave that as a parting question for all of us to take home. I know what my answer is. That's why I come to work every day. And my response to the stress that's induced by the situations that we have to navigate on a daily basis is to double down on that work. The self-described apocalyptimist. Anyway, on that happy note, Kamana.
Mahalo. Well, again, I really want to thank my students from Hui KaPAA for putting this together for us tonight. I'm just tremendously humbled and graced and hope this conversation can continue for us here in this room and for our University of Hawaii, for our place, Ko Hawaii Pai ʻāina. I know that our collaboration with Axel and his team will continue, so there will be these continuing, hopefully, opportunities for Aloha ʻāina and Circular Economies to touch base. But mahalo piha. Thank you, Matt, for jumping in and helping us to facilitate and bringing, your vast perspectives. Really, really valuable. And mahalo nui, everyone. And also, thank you for your patience. We held out a little bit for food, and we went a little bit long. So welcome to a Hawaiian party. That's kind of how they run. And on that gracious note, mahalo piha, ya opo pakahiapau, and we'll continue the conversations. Mahalo.